The wind over the wilds of Eriador carries more than cold and dust. It carries memory, echoes of a forgotten crown, and the sound of hooves, the sound of death. They came in silence, under moonless sky, riders cloaked in black, breath like poison, eyes like voids. And where they passed, silence followed. The scattered remnants of a fallen kingdom, once proud Arnor, had little left but old names and older fears. The line of kings, shattered. The northern watch dwindled to shadows in the trees, but one line still held, thin as spider silk, and just as easy to sever. Arathorn the Sioux rode fast that night. His son had only just opened his eyes to the world, a boy born of ancient blood, born into ruin. His name, Aragorn, but to speak it aloud then was to summon death. Arathorn's blade was sharp, his will unshaken. Yet he was a man already marked by prophecy, marked by the enemy. And he knew, as he rode through the wilds, that the child he had left behind in the arms of a grieving widow might never know peace, might never know him. What is it like to be born into a legacy of ghosts, to carry a name that draws blades in the dark? The boy would never know his father's voice, would never ride with him through the pine-shadowed hills of the north, because Arathorn's fate was written not in the stars, but in blood, an orc arrow through the eye, swift, merciless. In the cold woods of the Angle, the last chieftain of the Dunedain fell. His body would not see a king's burial. His crown had long since turned to ash, and so the widow wept, alone, beneath a gray sky. Gilran, fair of face, heavy with sorrow. She named him Estelle, hope, in the tongue of the elves. But what hope can endure when all the world has forgotten you? They fled into the west, past the ruins of Anuminaz and the broken towers of Fornost, into the secret valley of Rivendell, a hidden place, old as the world, where time moved like mist and memory clung to every stone. Elrond half-elven took them in, not as charity, but as duty, for he had seen this child in visions, a flicker of flame in encroaching shadow. And there, behind walls of enchantment and song, Aragorn was hidden, raised not as heir, but as orphan, his true name concealed even from himself. No crown, no burden, only stories, old tales of Numenor and honor, sung in fading tongues by elves who remembered the breaking of the world. Can a boy become a man if he does not know what he truly is? He ran through halls older than kings, played beneath trees that remembered the dawn, and he laughed like any child might, until the questions came. Who was his father? Why did the elves speak to him in whispers? Why did his mother's eyes carry such depthless sorrow? Elrond watched him grow, tall, silent, the fire in him undeniable, and on the eve of his 20th year, the truth was finally laid bare. His name was not Estelle, it was Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir to Isildur, last of the line of kings. The truth cracked something open in him, not pride, not joy, but weight, the kind that buries men alive. He was no longer just a boy of Rivendell. He was a thread in a tapestry that stretched back 3,000 years, one sewn with war, betrayal, and the long fall of a once great people. And with truth came burden. Elrond placed into his hands the relics of a broken past, the ring of Barahir, worn by kings of old, and the shards of Narsil, the sword that cut the ring from Sauron's hand. Cold steel, silent witnesses to a glory long dead. What would you have done in his place? Walked away, chosen a simpler path. But there was no simpler path for him, not anymore. And then, there was her, Arwen, daughter of Elrond. Even among the immortals she was radiant. Yet her eyes saw the shadow in him, the wound of legacy. They met beneath golden trees in the twilight, where the stars seemed to hold their breath. And there, something ancient stirred. Love, yes, but not the kind sung in ballads. A love laced with doom, because to love her was to ask her to die, not by sword or sickness, but by time. For she was eternal, He was not. Can love thrive in the shadow of death? But we're not there yet. Before crowns, before kisses, before war, there were years lost to wandering. The world beyond Rivendell was vast, cold, and broken. Aragorn took no banner, no name. He vanished into the wild as ranger, as outcast. He hunted the servants of darkness, lived among strangers, fought under foreign kings. He wore a dozen names, spoke in a dozen tongues. Thorongil, Strider, Shadowsword, names that whispered through the halls of men and elves alike. He fought with Rohan's riders, sailed with Gondor's captains, bled in the snows of the north and the deserts of the south. And all the while, the enemy watched, because Sauron, though bodiless, had not forgotten the line of Isildur, and in every shadow he sent whispers. Kill the heir, cut the line, end the threat before it can rise. But Aragorn did not fall. Not then, not yet. Each scar became a map, each loss a lesson, and each step brought him closer to the man he would need to become, not for himself, but for a world that would one day stand on the brink. In the east, Mordor stirred. In the west, kingdoms squabbled and slumbered, and in the dark places between, the heir of Isildur walked alone, not as king, not yet, but as the last hope of a dying world. The wind shifts in the forgotten wilds. It carries the scent of rain, ash, and something older still, something watching. In the years that followed his leaving of Rivendell, Aragorn vanished from the eyes of the world, not as retreat, but as strategy. He did not stride forth to claim a throne. He melted into shadow, a ghost among men, a whisper among the hills. He chose the life of a ranger, not out of pride, but necessity. It was not a life of glory, but of silence and suffering. There were no cities that called him protector, no lords who sang his praise. He moved through the ruins of the north like a sentinel lost in time. He hunted orcs in the forgotten woods, stalked the spies of the east, and walked roads that remembered the feet of kings long dead. But each night, when the fire burned low and the stars blinked overhead, he dreamed of her. Arwen, the even star, the light that could never be his, yet always was. And in that light, a question returned. What is the worth of a crown if it costs the life of love? Yet love did not temper the fire in him. It forged it, hardened it. In Gondor, they called him Thorongil, Eagle of the Star. He wore no name and gave no lineage. But under that cloak moved a force that could not be ignored. He fought in the name of another, as a captain beneath Ecthelion, father of the steward who would one day wither in his own madness. Thorongil commanded men with a gaze that needed no words. He struck swift, then vanished, as if he were part of the very earth. He rode with the cavalry of Rohan. He sailed the Anduin with Gondor's fleet. He cut down corsairs on burning ships and shattered their black sails under moonlight. But when victory came, he did not stay to be honored. He walked away. Always. Why? Because he knew. The throne was not yet his to claim, because something darker stirred in the east, and the game had only just begun. He returned north to the wilderness, where only the rangers of the Dunedain still stood between the free peoples and the dark. Men of the old blood, scattered, hunted, forgotten, and to them Aragorn became more than a leader. He became legend. They did not need to know his name. They saw it in his eyes. But legends cannot shield the heart from sorrow. The years were long. His mother, Gilraen, aged before her time. The weight of secrecy, of loss, of sacrifice, it hollowed her. She saw her son grow into a man who carried the past on his shoulders like a curse. And when she could bear it no longer, she left Rivendell, wandered into the wilds, and spoke only one thing before she passed into the west. I gave hope to the Dunedain. I have kept no hope for myself. And just like that, she was gone. Another name written in silence. But grief did not break Aragorn. It sharpened him. He stood now, not just as heir to a kingdom long forgotten, but as its guardian, a protector of realms that did not even know they needed saving. Because while the world looked eastward, fearing the eye, Aragorn watched the borders. He knew the signs, the shifting of beasts, the whispers in the trees. The enemy was not waiting, he was moving, and the hour of decision drew near. In the hills of Rudar and the haunted barrows of Cardolan, Aragorn fought wights and worse. He walked among the tombs of his forefathers with a sword that had no name. And all the while, the enemy's grip tightened, pulling men to madness, twisting creatures into nightmares. And then, the whispers began. A halfling, a shire dweller, no taller than a child, no louder than a whisper, carrying something impossible, something lost to legend. The One Ring. Isn't it strange? How fate can hinge on the smallest things. Aragorn had heard the name Baggins before, long ago in the echoes of Rivendell's halls, where Bilbo had once spoken riddles to elves and sung of dragons. But the news that a new Baggins bore the Ring of Power, that shook him to his core, for if the ring had returned, so too had its master. Aragorn could not let the halfling fall into the hands of the enemy, and so he returned to the edges of the Shire, not as king, not as Thorongil or Estelle, but as Strider, a name without weight, a mask, a warning. He found Frodo beneath the trees of Bree, wide-eyed and wary, clutching secrets he did not understand. Aragorn did not force trust, he earned it, with silence, with strength, with the unspoken promise that if he had to, he would die before letting the darkness touch this hobbit. And so they fled, into the wild, through rain and fear and black riders on black horses. The ringwraiths had found them, 9 kings, fallen, bound to the will of Sauron, hunting the scent of the ring with madness in their wake. They almost died that night. Almost. But the heir of Isildur did not fall. He fought with fire, with steel, with the fury of 1,000 lost generations crying out through his veins. He got them to Rivendell. He got them to safety. But safety, as always, was only an illusion, because Rivendell did not offer peace. It offered a choice. At the Council of Elrond, voices clashed like swords, men, elves, dwarves, and halflings, all speaking truths they barely understood. But it was Aragorn's silence that spoke loudest. For there, beside the shattered blade of his forefather, he did not claim power. He offered service. When Boromir questioned his lineage, Aragorn did not rise in anger. He looked at the broken sword, then back at the man, and said nothing, because he didn't need to. The sword would be reforged. The king would return. But only if he survived the darkness to come. And so the fellowship was formed. 9 companions. 1 purpose. But for Aragorn, it was more than a mission. It was the long path to destiny. And the hour was growing late. The river beneath the feet of the fellowship was swift, cold, unforgiving, but not nearly as dangerous as what hunted them. From Rivendell to the mines of Moria, the path was already steeped in loss. Snow closed the mountain pass. The wolves of the wild howled with a hunger that had no natural cause, and the land itself seemed to recoil from their presence, as if it too feared what they carried. Aragorn walked always at the edge of the group, not for solitude, for vigilance. He was not just protecting Frodo now. He was protecting the last hope of Middle-Earth. And in the long shadows of the mountains, even hope can falter. They took shelter in Moria, the Black Pit. Once a kingdom of dwarves, now a tomb echoing with drums beneath the earth. The moment Aragorn's foot crossed its threshold, he knew. This place had not been silent for long. Something lingered there, watching, waiting. They descended into darkness, and something followed. You could hear it in the silence between breaths, in the tremor of rock. The fear was thick, palpable. The hobbits looked to Gandalf, but it was Aragorn who often stood between them and the dark. Quiet, sword always in reach. Every step in that place was a step deeper into shadow. And then, the drums began. Doom, doom. In the deep, they were not alone. Orcs poured from the walls like insects, eyes glowing, blades screaming. The fellowship fought with desperation. Aragorn's blade danced like a memory of the ancient kings cutting through the tide. But even he, fierce as he was, could not protect them from what came next. From beneath the foundations of the world, fire stirred, the Balrog. A creature from a time before memory, born of shadow and flame. A demon of the ancient wars, and when it came for them, even Aragorn, war-hardened and fearless, felt the weight of something beyond reckoning. Gandalf stood alone against it. "You shall not pass." And with those words, he fell, gone, into the abyss. Light swallowed by flame, they escaped barely, into the sunlight. But the sun offered no warmth, only grief. And in that grief, something changed. The fellowship had lost its guide, its pillar, and in the silence that followed, they turned to him, not with words, with eyes. It is a strange thing to feel the world shift upon your shoulders. Aragorn did not seek to lead, but in that moment he knew he had to. They ran, wounded and weary, into the golden wood of Lothlorien, where time stands still and memory walks among the leaves. Galadriel saw into his soul, saw the weight he bore, the fear that still gripped his heart, the doubt that whispered every time he reached for the past. Would he fall to the same weakness as his ancestor? Would he too fail? She did not offer him comfort. She offered him truth. "Your hands are the hands of a healer, and that shall be your strength. Not the sword, not the crown, the hands, the choice. What is strength if not restraint? What is power if not sacrifice?" They left Lothlorien down the great river, hearts still heavy, days thick with tension. The ring had begun to weigh more heavily on Frodo. Its pull was no longer subtle. It burned, whispered, and in the silence of camp, Aragorn sometimes caught Frodo staring at him, not with trust but with fear, the same fear he saw in Boromir, because Boromir was breaking, a good man, a brave man, but the ring was carving him hollow. Aragorn saw it, and still he waited, still he hoped, but the ring has no mercy. It twists hope into weakness, faith into doubt. Boromir broke in the woods of Parth-Galen. He tried to take the ring from Frodo, with tears in his eyes, with trembling hands, and Frodo ran. Aragorn found the hobbit moments later, alone, afraid, and in that instant, everything hinged on silence. If Aragorn had stepped forward, if he had reached for the ring, if he had even hesitated, but he didn't. He fell to one knee and whispered, "I would have gone with you to the end, into the very fires of Mordor." He let Frodo go, because it was not his path to take the burden. It was his to protect those who still could. But the fellowship was broken. Merry and Pippin, taken by orcs. Frodo and Sam vanished into the wild. Boromir, dying beneath the trees. Arrows had pierced him again and again. But he stood to the last, not for Gondor, not for pride, for them, for the hobbits. Aragorn held him as the light faded from his eyes, and Boromir wept. I tried to take the ring from him. Aragorn did not flinch. "I know." And when Boromir asked if he had failed, Aragorn said, "No. You fought bravely. You have kept your honor." He kissed his brow like a brother, and let him go. There, beneath the canopy of ancient woods, Aragorn felt the full weight of his destiny pressed down. He had not saved Frodo. He had not stopped the breaking, but he could still protect what remained. He rose, blade drawn. The world was burning, but the fire in him had just begun to rise. He would not chase the ring. He would chase the enemy. The orcs had taken the hobbits, so Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, hunted them like a storm unleashed. The age of waiting was over. Now came the age of action and war. The hunt began beneath a red sky. The orcs ran east with their captives, confident in their numbers, ignorant of what followed. But behind them came a shadow swift and tireless, 3 figures bound by grief, fury, and an oath not yet fulfilled. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli. 3 hunters, one purpose. To the north, the world still slept, unaware. But in the Riddermark, in the lands of Rohan, the grasslands whispered of war. Dark wings circled overhead, villages burned and vanished without sound. And the people, horse lords proud and free, now lived in fear of things they did not yet understand. But the hunters had no time for omens. They ran, without sleep, without rest, across leagues of open plain and craggy hill. Aragorn followed every sign: broken twigs, trampled grass, a dropped belt buckle, a child's footprint. He moved like a man possessed. He read the earth as if it spoke to him, because to him it did. Each mark was a heartbeat, each track a whisper. "They're still alive," he murmured more than once. Not as hope, as certainty, as command, because if they were not, then all of this madness, this loss, would have no meaning. But days passed, the trail grew colder. The orcs were fast, ruthless, driven by something more. And then, one night as the moon hung pale over the plains, Aragorn stopped. He knelt, fingers brushed the soil. Blood, not orc. He pressed his hand flat against the ground, closed his eyes. Something had happened here. Not long ago, Legolas turned sharply, his elven senses already reaching out. They were attacked, Gimli frowned. By what? Not men, not orcs. Aragorn stood slowly, his face was hard, set. By Rohan, the Rohirrim, horse lords, warriors of unmatched speed and skill, but not allies. Not yet. The trio followed the trail to a battlefield littered with corpses, orc bodies hacked and burned. But no sign of the hobbits, none, only charred bones, splintered weapons, and smoke. Despair began to crawl in, but Aragorn would not yield. He walked among the dead. He touched their weapons, smelled the air. He felt, and in the ashes, he found a clue, a mark in the dirt, a print too small for an orc, a shift in the grass where someone had rolled, fled, escaped. They lived. He knew they lived, and that fire, ever burning inside him, rose again. He turned toward the east, but before they could go further, they were surrounded. Hooves thundered, spears gleamed in the dawn. Eomer, nephew of the king, captain of the Riddermark, blocked their path with 100 riders. Proud, stern, suspicious, they were not allies. Not yet. "State your name," Eomer barked. Aragorn did not flinch. "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn. I am friend to Rohan and to Theoden." Eomer's face barely changed. Theoden no longer recognizes friend from foe. Saruman's voice speaks in his halls. And there it was, the sickness, the creeping rot of the White Wizard. Saruman, once of the White Council, now turned traitor, poisoner of minds, betrayer of oaths. He had sent his orcs into Rohan under black banners. Crossbred monsters, Uruk-hai, bred not just for war, but for domination. And Theoden, once proud, once noble, was falling to shadow. Aragorn felt it like a knife in the air, so he spoke quickly, not as a king, but as a soldier, a man on a hunt. 2 halflings had been taken, captives, friends, heroes in their own right. Eomer listened, and then slowly his stance changed. He dismounted, stepped forward, looked Aragorn in the eye. A long silence passed, and then he spoke. "I do not know what strange fate has brought you here, but it is not chance." He gave them horses, and a warning. "Your friends are not dead. Not yet. But death will find them swiftly, if you do not." Aragorn bowed his head in thanks, and rode, faster than before. Eyes sharp, jaw set. There was no more time to lose. The plains gave way to the edges of Fangorn Forest, an ancient place. Old beyond words. The trees there did not whisper. They remembered, and they did not forget. And there, in the shadows of that forest, Aragorn found something impossible. Footprints, light, small, hobbit-sized, leading into the trees. But it was not only the hobbits that waited there. A figure stood in the mist, cloaked in white, not orc, not man, not beast. At first, Aragorn reached for his sword, Because he had seen him fall. He had watched the Balrog drag him into the depths. He had mourned him, Gandalf, but not as he was, no longer gray. Now, white as flame, terrible in light, beautiful in power, Gandalf the White, returned from death, reforged by something beyond mortal comprehension. Aragorn did not question it, because deep down he had always known. The war was not meant to be fought alone. The wizard's return changed everything. Gandalf told them the truth. Merry and Pippin were safe, saved by the forest itself, protected by creatures older than kings. But the greater battle loomed. Rohan teetered on the brink, its king corrupted, its people scattered, and Saruman's armies were moving, not quietly, not slowly, but now, swift as the tide, 10,000 strong, marching to Helm's Deep, the ancient stronghold of the Rohirrim. If it fell, Rohan would fall. If Rohan fell, Gondor would follow. And so Aragorn turned his gaze from the trees to the mountains. There would be no rest. Not for him, not for the hunted, not for the heir of Isildur. The war for Middle-Earth had begun. Night falls fast in the lands of Rohan, faster still when war rides its back. The wind, once full of song and galloping hooves, now carries only the scent of smoke and fear. Aragorn stands upon a ridge, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where a darkness grows not from cloud but from steel, fire, and the will of a corrupted mind. Saruman's army marches, 10,000 strong, bred not just to kill, but to conquer, to erase. Behind Aragorn, the people of Rohan flee, not warriors, families, elders and children, clutching what little they can carry as they ride for Helm's Deep, a fortress of stone carved into the bones of the mountain, ancient, defensible, but not unbreakable, not against what comes. And at the front of it all, a king brought low, Theoden, son of Thengel, a man whose will had been bent by whispers, by Wormtongue, by Saruman. He speaks now with the voice of pride, but not clarity. His eyes are open, but he does not see. Aragorn watches him, not with judgment, but with understanding, because Aragorn too carries a voice in his blood. The voice of Isildur, the man who failed, the man who took the ring and doomed a world, and every step Aragorn takes toward leadership, that voice whispers in his ear, "You are not strong enough. You will falter, like he did." But still, he walks forward. They arrive at Helm's Deep beneath gray skies. The walls rise high, ancient and cold, but they were built for soldiers, not for the terrified. Inside, there are women and boys, blacksmiths, farmers, men who have never raised a sword now sharpen blades with trembling hands. Aragorn moves among them like a ghost from another age. He does not speak of hope. He shows them preparation. He teaches. He fights alongside them. He reminds them, not with words but with presence, that they are not yet dead. And then the elves come. A host from Lothlorien, led by Haldir, armored in moonlight, answering a call that was never sent. They come not out of duty, but out of honor. Out of belief in one man, not Theoden Aragorn, because some now begin to see him for what he truly is, not just a ranger, not just the heir of a forgotten line, but a king in exile, who fights not for power, but for the powerless. Night falls, the army arrives, and the storm begins. The walls shake beneath the impact of siege ladders and the roar of Uruk-hai. The sky cracks with lightning and screams. Steel meets flesh in the cold rain. And in the chaos, Aragorn is everywhere. He leads the charge atop the wall. He drags wounded to safety. He shouts orders above the thunder, his voice steady even as the lines begin to break. This is no noble battle. It is slaughter, and the fortress is failing. In the darkest hour, Theoden begins to despair. So much death. What can men do against such reckless hate? Aragorn turns to him, not with comfort, but with fire. "Ride out with me." The king hesitates. "For death and glory?" "For Rohan." Aragorn answers, "For your people." They ride at dawn, through broken gates into a sea of blades, and for a moment, just a moment, the tide halts. Because in that charge, in that fury, the shadow falters. And then, horn, a single sound rising above the clash, from the ridge Gandalf, and at his side, Éomer and the riders of the mark. Light breaks over the hill, and the world shifts. The Uruk-hai fall, scattered, shattered. Rohan stands, but not without cost. Haldir lies broken among the stones. Countless others lie with him, and as Aragorn moves through the aftermath, he sees it not as victory, but as warning, because Saruman was only the beginning. In the east, a greater darkness stirs. Barad-dûr's eye is fixed now not on hobbits, but on him, the heir, the challenger, the threat. And as Aragorn rides with Gandalf from the deep, he knows peace will not return in his lifetime, if it returns at all. Ahead lies Gondor, a city of white towers and brittle pride, a city unready for the war that approaches, and beyond Gondor, Mordor, the Black Land, where Frodo walks, unseen, toward a fire that cannot be quenched. But before Aragorn can face that storm, he must face his past in the mountains of the dead, where only those with true claim and truer courage dare walk. The path of the king does not go forward, it goes down into shadow. There are places in Middle-earth where even the birds do not sing, where wind does not blow, where time feels wrong. South of Gondor, across the wind-swept plains, there lies a road cut into the roots of the White Mountains, ancient, cracked, silent. It is called the Paths of the Dead, and this is where Aragorn must go. The battle for Middle-earth is no longer coming. It is here. Sauron has moved. His legions pour from Mordor like a plague. Gondor stands on the brink, her beacon towers cold and unlit. Denethor, the steward, sits atop his marble throne in madness and mourning, blind to the doom riding toward his gates, and yet all eyes turn to Aragorn. They begin to whisper now, not just in Rohan, but in Gondor's court, among elves and men alike. Isildur's heir walks the earth again. But what does that mean? A crown? A sword? Or something more terrifying? Responsibility. And with it, a choice. Aragorn has no army, no banners, no time. Only a name, and a promise made to the dead. Long ago, in the elder days, Isildur cursed an oath-breaking people, men who pledged themselves to fight Sauron and fled when the moment came. He condemned them to undeath, bound to the mountains, unable to rest. 1,000 years have passed, and still they linger in the dark, neither living nor truly dead. No man has dared call upon them, until now. Gandalf rides for Minas Tirith. The hobbits walk deeper into the Black Lands, and Aragorn walks into shadow. Legolas and Gimli follow, without question. Because loyalty does not ask for explanations. It walks beside you into death. The gates to the mountain yawn like a wound. Black, endless, they enter, and the light vanishes. Inside, the silence is thick, not absence, but pressure, as if the very stone is watching. Aragorn speaks not a word. He walks, they move deeper, and the dead begin to gather. Figures rise from cracks in the walls, from the dust of the floor, pale, translucent, twisted by centuries of guilt and hatred. A crownless man dares summon them. They surround him, mock him. "You have no power here," they hiss. But Aragorn does not flinch. He draws his sword, not just steel, Andúril, flame of the west, forged anew from the shards of Narsil, the sword that cut the ring from Sauron's hand. They recoil, because they know that blade, and the man who bears it. "I am Isildur's heir," Aragorn says, voice like thunder in a tomb. "I call upon you to fulfill your oath." The mountain trembles. Silence, then a whisper. "What say you?" The dead vanish, but not in refusal, in readiness. Outside, a black fleet sails up the river. Corsairs, mercenaries, allies of Mordor, bearing down upon Gondor's last hope from the sea, but they do not know what waits for them, because from the mountain rides death. Aragorn appears at the river's edge, not with an army of men, but with an army of the damned. The ghost host falls upon the Corsairs like a storm of wrath. Swords pass through steel, walls crumble beneath their fury, ships sink under invisible weight, no soul survives. And when the river runs red, Aragorn stands alone on the deck. Victorious, but even now, he does not claim the throne. He turns to the dead, eyes solemn. You have fulfilled your oath, be at peace. And with that, he sets them free, an army given and released, because a true king does not rule with fear. He leads with mercy, and so, with black sails turned to white, Aragorn turns his eyes toward Gondor. Minas Tirith is burning, the white city under siege, trolls batter the gates, Nazgûl scream overhead. The sky is black with ash and fire, and Denethor, steward, not king, prepares to burn his own son alive. But into that fire, hope rides. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir to Elendil, returns not in shadow but in flame. He rides at the head of an army reborn, Rohirrim at his back, the ships of the corsairs now flying his banner. Dúnedain rangers at his side. He does not ask for permission. He does not wait for welcome. He rides into the war, and the tide turns, not by force alone, but by will. Because when Aragorn fights, he does not fight for glory. He fights for the child hiding in the rubble, for the soldier bleeding beneath the wall, for the promise that kingdoms can rise again, not through conquest, but through courage. The gates of Minas Tirith do not fall, the city holds. But this is no ending. It is only the beginning of the last stand, because Sauron still watches, still waits, and the ring still moves through Mordor, carried by a halfling, barely alive. Aragorn sees it now, clearer than ever. This war will not be won with swords. It will be won with sacrifice. And so he turns to Gandalf, to the captains of men, and he says the unthinkable. We draw out the eye. One last march, one last stand before the black gates, not to conquer, but to distract, to give the ring-bearer a chance. Aragorn does not know if Frodo still lives. He does not know if any of it will work, but he walks forward anyway, because that is what kings do. The plain before the black gate is dead. Ash covers the ground like snow that never melts. No bird sings. No breath of wind stirs the dust. The air itself is heavy, thick with dread, as if the world holds its breath waiting. And there, at the edge of the shadow, the last army of men gathers. They are few, so few. The broken, the weary, the remnants of kingdoms long past. Rohirrim, Dúnedain, Gondorian, faces young and old, smeared with dust, bearing wounds that never had time to heal. Not one among them is untouched by loss, but they stand. Not because they believe they can win, but because they believe someone else must. Frodo. Sam, two hobbits, somewhere beyond that black wall, carrying the fate of all things in their blistered hands. And so Aragorn waits beneath the gray sky. He looks out over the ruin of the world, and then behind him, at those who chose to stand with him in defiance. Not of death, of despair. Gandalf rides forward, staff in hand. Beside him, Aragorn, then Éomer, Legolas, Gimli, Merry, Pippin. It is not an army of kings or lords. It is a fellowship. And this is their final act. They reach the black gate, massive, impenetrable, like the wall of night itself. For a long moment, there is no sound, no movement, only the weight of the eye, watching, searching, waiting. And then it opens, not with creak or groan, but with a shriek. A black host pours forth, endless, terrible. Trolls and orcs, men twisted by sorcery, beasts bred in nightmare. Their banners are filth, their breath poison, and at the center, the mouth of Sauron. A thing in the shape of a man, but not a man. Pale lips twisted into mockery, voice like rotting silk. He speaks, and what he carries stills the blood. Frodo's mithril shirt, his cloak, his blade. Gandalf's voice wavers. For the first time, uncertainty. But Aragorn steps forward. He says nothing. The mouth of Sauron mocks. Aragorn draws his sword, and Duril. In a single motion, the creature's head falls, not out of rage, out of refusal. refusal to believe the worst, refusal to give in. The enemy howls, and the gate unleashes hell. 10,000 strong, and barely 300 to stand against them. They form a ring upon the blasted plain, shields up, swords drawn, the last light of men. Aragorn walks among them. His voice is low, steady, certain. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. He pauses, looks into their eyes, but it is not this day. He raises his sword. This day, we fight, and with a cry that echoes across the ruin, they charge. Into death, into legend. The ground shakes, steel sings, the sky blackens with arrows. Trolls crash into their lines like walking towers. Orcs swarm like vermin, but the ring holds. And in the center, Aragorn fights like a man not trying to survive, but trying to give others the chance. Because every moment they hold the line, Frodo moves closer to Mount Doom. They cannot see him, they do not know, but they believe, and so they fight. The eye turns fully toward them now, all its hate, all its will, and for a moment, it works. Frodo stumbles, the ring tempts, the world trembles, and Aragorn falters. His blade drips blood, his body breaks, but he rises. Across the plain he sees the Nazgul descend from the black sky like fire. He sees the enemy closing, he sees the end. And he does something strange. He smiles. Because in that final moment he knows, it's working. The eye is blind, and somewhere far away, hope burns. The ring is cast, and the world shudders. From the cracks of Mount Doom, fire erupts. The eye of Sauron screams. And the tower falls, not slowly, not gracefully. It crumbles like a corpse rotting into dust. The ground swallows armies whole. The wind carries ash across the sky, and the black tide that once seemed eternal vanishes. Silence. Then wind. Then sun. The Dark Lord is gone. And Aragorn falls to his knees, not from pain, from relief, from disbelief, from the unbearable weight of hope fulfilled. The war is over, but the story is not. The sun rises slowly over the wreckage of Mordor, casting light upon the broken landscape. The black towers that once stood as monuments to Sauron's power are no more than smoldering ruins, their shadows swallowed by the brightness of dawn. The air smells of ash and burnt earth, but there is something else now, something that has not been felt for an age. It is the smell of freedom, of a new beginning. And somewhere, amidst the remains of a world torn asunder, a king walks forward. Aragorn, his sword, Andúril, is no longer a weapon of war. It is a symbol of sacrifice, of endurance, and of a promise made, not just to the people of Middle-earth, but to himself. He had never truly wanted the crown, not in the way others thought he did. He did not seek power for power's sake. His heart had been forged in the wilds, tempered by the death of his father and the shadow of his ancestors' failure. He had fought because he had to. He had led because no one else would. And now, at the threshold of victory, he was a man, not of legend, but of blood and bone. Tired, scarred, and uncertain. But a king is not made by his birthright alone. He is made by the moments when the weight of his people rests on his shoulders, when his will bends not to his own desires, but to the needs of the world around him. Aragorn had learned this in the wilderness, in the depths of shadow, in the moments when no one else was watching. Now standing before the gates of Minas Tirith, the city of white stone, the very heart of Gondor, he is a king in truth. The last heir of Isildur, whose bloodline had been lost in the ashes of time, now stands as its rightful ruler. But it is not the crown that calls to him. It is the people, the men and women whose lives had been shaped by war and loss, whose future now lies in his hands. The city waits. Gondor had been on the brink of collapse, its steward a broken man, his mind lost to despair. Denethor had burned himself in his madness, unwilling to accept the truth of what his son Boromir had become, and what his own heart could not bear. Gondor had almost fallen to the shadow of its own king's grief, but now Now it must rise again. The people wait at the gates. They wait not for a conqueror, but for a savior. But Aragorn does not enter alone. Behind him, the allies who had ridden with him to the end of the world are with him still. Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, Éomer, and the hobbits who had carried the burden of the ring. Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. The small folk whose courage had outshone the greatest of kings and warriors. They have saved Middle-earth. But now the question remains, can they save themselves? The streets of Minas Tirith are filled with the sound of celebration, but it is not without its shadows. The scars of the war remain upon the hearts of men. The memory of the dead of those who fell at Helm's Deep, at Pelennor Fields, at the gates of Mordor, lingers like a ghost in every face. Aragorn stands before the throne. It is empty. For a moment, he hesitates. His hand rests on the hilt of his sword, his gaze drawn to the empty seat. This is it. The moment he has waited for. The moment he has fought for. The moment when the weight of Middle-earth shifts from the shoulders of the fallen to the man who stands before them. But the crown is not yet placed upon his head. Instead, he looks out across the city, to the people who had given everything for this moment, for this new dawn, and then he kneels, not before the throne, but before them. He kneels before the people of Gondor, not as a king, but as a servant, as one of them, because Aragorn understands, in that moment, what the crown truly means. It is not a symbol of power. It is a symbol of responsibility. He had taken the paths of the dead, faced the darkness of Mordor, led his people through battles unimaginable. But now, in this moment of peace, he understands that the greatest test of kingship is not in war, but in mercy, in humility, in knowing that power is a heavy thing, and it must be carried with wisdom and care. The people watch him, and they do not see a man who has claimed his right. They see a man who has earned it, and then, slowly, they begin to kneel with him, and when they rise, the crown is placed upon his brow. It is not grand, not golden or studded with jewels. It is simple, forged from the broken crowns of his ancestors, the weight of history upon it. But it is his. The city erupts in cheer, and in that moment Aragorn understands that this, the crown, the throne, the city, is not what matters. What matters is the promise to rebuild, to heal, to lead not as a ruler of men, but as one who walks beside them, who knows their pain, their hopes, their fears. The path is not over. There are still wounds to mend, scars to heal. But Aragorn knows this now. The greatest victories are not those won on the battlefield, but those fought in the hearts of those we love and those we serve. And so the king rises, not just to claim his place, but to claim his purpose, to walk with his people into the future, hand in hand, heart with heart, and from that day forward, the banner of Gondor flies not just above the White City, but above the hearts of its people, for they have found their king, and with him they have found their hope. The war is over. The shadows have been driven back, but the story, as always, continues, because the true battle is not won in the darkness. It is won in the light, and Aragorn walks forward into that light, into the dawn of a new age. The winds of change sweep through Gondor, not the winds of war, of death, or shadow, but something rarer, something slower, more insidious. The winds of peace, and peace, as Aragorn quickly learns, is no less a battle than war. It is a constant struggle against complacency, a quiet war waged in the hearts of men. For in the aftermath of Mordor's fall, the scars left upon Middle-earth are not always visible, but they are deep. The days are long, but the nights are longer. There is no triumphant end, no final celebration. There is only the steady, unrelenting work of rebuilding, of healing, a work that seems endless in its weight. A king must govern, but a king must also remember. He must remember the fallen, the broken, and the ones who have no voice in the halls of power. Aragorn does not rule with the hand of an emperor. He rules with the heart of a servant. The throne of Gondor is no longer a distant thing, a symbol of power from which the world is governed. It is now an instrument of responsibility, a responsibility that weighs heavily on his shoulders every moment of every day. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, Aragorn spends more time in the quiet corridors of the city than in the grand halls. He speaks to the people in the streets, listens to their stories, understands their struggles. There are no great wars left to fight, no armies to lead. But there are still wounds to heal, still old alliances to rebuild, feuds to resolve, and kingdoms to unify. The Dunedain, once scattered and forgotten, now look to him. Rohan still lingers in the shadow of its past, a kingdom forever marked by war. Elves, too, retreat from Middle-Earth. Their time here is ending, and the fate of the remaining peoples, those who fought and survived, lies in the hands of one man. And yet, Gondor is not just the throne, it is the land, it is the people. It is a living thing, both fragile and unbreakable. And it is here that Aragorn begins to understand something far more complex than he could ever have imagined in the heat of battle. It is not enough to defeat Sauron. You must defeat what remains. The darkness that clings to the hearts of men. The doubt that follows even the greatest victory. The fear that a better world might not come after all. And so Aragorn takes on a mantle no king before him has ever worn. Not just the mantle of rule, but the mantle of healing. And it is here, as the years unfold, that we see the king that Aragorn truly becomes. Not the sword-wielding ranger of old, not the reluctant hero who once walked in the shadows, torn between duty and desire, but the man who understands that kingship is not just about power, it is about service. He spends days with the farmers of Ithilien, rebuilding the forests with Faramir at his side. He works beside the masons who repair the great walls of Minas Tirith. He shares meals with soldiers who have returned from the front lines, listens to their stories, their fears. He rides to Rohan, to the Golden Fields, and spends time with Éomer and his people. He has learned that his kingship extends not just over Gondor, but to every free land in Middle-Earth, because they are all bound together by blood and history. And though his reign begins in shadow, as all things do, it blossoms into something greater. The rebuilding of the White City is not just a physical task, it is a metaphor. It is the restoration of hope, the return of faith to a people who have known nothing but loss. But beneath the work, the heart of the city beats again, the sound of laughter, the hum of life. But even as Aragorn builds, he does not forget. He cannot forget. He cannot forget the war, the horror, the devastation. The memory of the dead does not fade, and neither does the memory of the ring, because for all the healing that takes place in Minas Tirith, for all the joy that returns to the hearts of its people, there is one truth that Aragorn cannot escape. The shadow may have been defeated, but there are those who have seen too much, who have walked through the darkness and come out on the other side. Scarred. Gimli and Legolas, for all their victory, carry that weight. The elves of Lothlorien, once vibrant and full of light, now seem like ghosts. And the hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, though they have returned to the Shire, have not truly returned to themselves. And Aragorn knows deep down that some wounds are too deep to ever truly heal, but they do heal in time. For he too carries a burden, one that he can never escape. He has seen the world as it was and as it could be, and the burden of leadership, the burden of memory, weighs heavy on him, and yet Gondor thrives. The fields of Ithilien are green once more. The people, though scarred, are whole again. And Aragorn's line, his bloodline, is secure. He has a son now, Eldarion. The future of Gondor, of Middle-Earth, lies in the hands of this child, this innocent soul who knows nothing of the war, nothing of the shadow that nearly swallowed the world. And in this, Aragorn sees something even greater than victory. He sees the possibility of a world without the shadow, a world where children can grow up without knowing the darkness, a world where kings can rule with wisdom and compassion, not with fear and force. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, King Elisar of Gondor, he has brought about the dawn of a new age. But it is not his age. It is the age of those who come after, the age of the children, of those who never saw the war, the children who will inherit the world he has fought for. And in that, Aragorn finds peace, not because the world is perfect, not because the darkness is truly gone, but because the light is strong enough to hold the shadows at bay. The story of Aragorn does not end in legend. It ends in life. It ends in the quiet moments, the ones where no one else is watching, where the king is simply a man, a father, a husband, a servant of the people he swore to protect. And in those moments, in the quiet of Minas Tirith, Aragorn knows that the future is bright. For the first time, in his heart, he knows the truth. The world is not his to conquer, it is his to preserve. And so he does, for as long as he lives. For as long as they need him, he leads, he loves, and he never forgets. The King of Gondor, a king of peace. The years pass quietly now, as all things must. But even in quiet, there is weight. The people of Middle-Earth, once bound together by war, now walk paths of peace. The scars of the past fade, though they do not vanish completely. They linger in the hearts of those who survived, those who carried the burden of the world, and those who lost everything in its shadow. Aragorn's reign has come to be remembered not for the battles he fought, nor the enemies he vanquished, but for the kingdom he built, a kingdom not founded on the sword, but on the labor of the heart. And though he no longer wears the heavy mantle of war, his every decision, his every move, is still shadowed by the legacy of what came before. Minas Tirith stands as it always has, a symbol of Gondor's strength. But beneath its walls, life has returned. The fields of Ithilien are green again, a far cry from the charred wasteland they once were. The trees stand tall, their roots digging deep into the earth, their branches stretched wide as though embracing the dawn. The White City is no longer the fortress of battle, but the heart of a thriving, living world. In his quiet moments, Aragorn walks the streets of his city. He does not walk as a king, but as a man, tired, thoughtful, but at peace. He walks with his family, with Arwen by his side, and their son, Eldarion, a young prince who will one day carry the weight of his father's legacy. Together, they move among the people, unnoticed but ever present. A family bound not just by blood, but by the shared knowledge that they have witnessed the rebirth of a world. Gondor is a kingdom of the living, the kingdom of men, yes, but also of hope, of perseverance, of remembrance. It is not perfect, but it is strong, strong enough to endure, strong enough to keep the darkness at bay. And yet, even in peace, there are remnants of the old world. For though Sauron is gone, and the ring has been destroyed, Middle-Earth has not been completely freed from the shadow. The elves, those who remain, are beginning their final departure. Their time here, on this earth, is ending. The boats that sail from the shores of the Grey Havens are filled with the last of their kind. The woods of Lothlorien, once bright with starlight, now stand empty, save for the few who linger. Galadriel, the Lady of the Wood, has passed into the west, leaving behind only memories of a time long gone. Legolas, too, sails for the undying lands, his heart heavy with the weight of years that cannot be undone. The dwarves of Erebor rebuild their halls, their songs filling the caverns once again. And though Gimli remains in Middle-Earth, he is a different dwarf than the one who stood at the gates of Helm's Deep. His friendship with Legolas endures, but now it is more a memory than a living bond. Their adventures are behind them, and though they share tales, they know the end is nigh. And what of the hobbits? Frodo and Sam return to the Shire. They walk its familiar hills, but there is no peace for Frodo. He bears a wound that cannot be healed, a burden that even the soft green fields of the Shire cannot erase. The ring has been destroyed, but its shadow still lingers in his heart. The weight of that journey, the sacrifice, the loss, remains, and Frodo knows that his place is no longer here. He sails with Gandalf and the elves, leaving Middle-Earth behind, not for any fault of the world, but because some wounds run too deep. Sam, ever loyal, follows him. They are the last of the Fellowship to leave, and as they step aboard the ship, Aragorn watches them go. And he knows in that moment that the world he fought to save will never be the same. The ages are turning. The elves fade into legend. The dwarves return to their halls, and the hobbits, Those small, humble folk who had carried the greatest burden of all will fade into the pages of history. But Aragorn remains, as a king, as a father, as a man. And though his reign is long, though his people prosper, Aragorn knows that his time too will come. It is the way of all things. Even kings must fade into legend. The years pass, and Aragorn ages as all men do. His hair, once dark and thick, begins to gray. His stride slows. His hands, though steady, are weathered by time. But his mind remains sharp, and his heart as true as it ever was. He watches as Eldarion, his son, begins to take on more of the responsibilities of the kingdom. He sees the same determination, the same unwavering strength in the young prince that once burned so brightly within him. And one day, in the quiet of his chambers, Aragorn reflects on all that he has done, all that he has been, and all that he has become. He is no longer the ranger who wandered in the wild, unsure of his place. He is no longer the reluctant hero, torn between love and duty. He is no longer the heir of a broken kingdom. He is Elisar, the King of Gondor, the one who fought the darkness, the one who rebuilt a world. And as he gazes out over the lands he has saved, he knows that his time is ending. But he does not mourn it, for he has seen the world become what it was always meant to be, alive with the possibility of hope. And as he passes into the twilight of his years, Aragorn knows one thing above all else. The true measure of a king is not in how he rules, but in how he loves. And so he passes from the world, not with regret, but with the knowledge that he has done what was needed. He has given the world a chance to heal, to grow, to live. And that, in the end, is all anyone can hope for. The story of Aragorn, the King Elisar, will be told for generations to come. But the legacy he leaves behind is not one of crowns or thrones, but of a simple truth, that the greatest victories are not won on the battlefield. They are won in the hearts of those we love. And in that, Aragorn's reign is eternal, for Gondor, for Middle-earth, and for all that will come after.